The Ravens did everything they could this offseason to make Lamar Jackson happy. They replaced offensive coordinator Greg Roman with offensive coordinator Todd Monken, which was a signal that they want to transform from a run-heavy offense into a pass-centric offense. They also brought in one of the top wide receiver free agents in Odell Beckham. And on top of that, they signed one of the top wide receiver prospects with their first-round draft pick in Zay Flowers. So they've done a lot to make Lamar Jackson happy, including signing him to a huge new contract with $185 million in guarantees. So what has Lamar Jackson done with all these changes? He's currently 20th in the league in passing yards with only 4 passing touchdowns so far. But they have faced a tough schedule of pass defenses too. Cleveland is ranked number 1 in DVOA versus the pass. Cincinnati is ranked number 12, and Pittsburgh is ranked number 9. So they faced 3 out of their 5 opponents this season have had really good pass defenses. So it doesn't help also that the receivers have been dropping easy passes, but they've also been dealing with a lot of injuries in their receiver core, with bad luck and injuries to the receiving core and the offensive line, in addition to Mark Andrews. They've all missed time this year, which dings up that passing game for Lamar Jackson. So there are signals that the passing game is ready to break out versus the right opponent, though. Lamar is 5th in completion percentage, and according to Ben Solak of The Ringer, he's throwing the ball 0.3 seconds faster under Monken, which is a sign that he's comfortable in the offense. The pass success rate is up, and they are using 3 wide receiver sets at a 76% rate under Monken versus 48% under Roman. Now they get the Titans, who are the 27th ranked pass DVOA defense. So the question is, the $1 million question for this week is, will this be the week that the passing game breaks out? Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heatseeker Sports, and I'm joined today by Spread Astaire, and this is Gamescript. This is a show where we like to break down these island games, and today's game that we're going to be breaking down is a good one between the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans. They're going to be playing early Sunday morning in London. And Spread, what's going on, man?
Man, we're getting more and more of these London games as the NFL continues its move into these markets, right? They're obviously really heavily attacking the European market later this year, and I'll actually be in Vegas for that game. But Miami and Kansas City are going to face off in Germany, and that's a huge game for sports fans. And that's probably, in my memory, the best game we sent to Europe as far as implications on the playoffs and the 2 top teams. So we got to get, this is coming more and more. One thing that I want to bring up, and it doesn't really affect how we're going to build our builds, a little bit of criticism last week about this field here in Tottenham. And supposedly the Tottenham wanted an extra $10 million and Goodell wouldn't pay up for the normal grass field. So some complaints about the field here too. I wonder how that storyline is going to continue to play out. Not going to affect the way that we build our lineups today, but I think it's something to watch going forward, especially as the NFL continues to try and build this partnership over in Europe.
Yeah, definitely interesting there. From what I heard, Von Miller was doing a lot of criticism based on who was it, Milan's injury. Basically,
Bruce Milano.
Yeah, basically, it's a like a concrete floor that they're rolling like a sheet of grass on or something like that. So it's really rough terrain, and we got the game playing there this weekend too. Another interesting note, just about the way that these European games play out, is Baltimore flew to London back on Monday, and they've been there the whole week. Meanwhile, the Titans decided to fly out there Thursday after practice. So we could see a similar situation to what we saw last week, Spread, when we were talking about how the Bills might come out a little bit sluggish. And we nailed on that game script. And we also nailed our, what was it, Monday night or Sunday night? When the
Raiders Packers.
Yeah, Raiders versus the Packers. We nailed that one too. So we've been on a roll with breaking down these games so far. And, like if you've been watching, you've been making some money, hopefully. So do us a favor, hit the subscribe on this YouTube channel, hit the like button on this video. Going to try for 15 likes. If we can get 15 likes, I'm going to put out a short video at some point between, when I hit that 15 likes in the start of this game to put out a short video with, my final thoughts on guys that I am fan of playing this week the most. So do me a favor and hit that like button and Spread it. Let's get into breaking down this game, because this is going to be an interesting one. And I think we're both on board with a certain captain idea that we're going to be building a lineup around. But first, we're going to review this player pool to kind of take a look at the players that we have and who will be interesting for this game. And we lead off with Lamar Jackson, who has been pretty good this year. He's got a few good games under his belt so far. Last week he was a little sluggish against Pittsburgh, but that's to be understandable. Playing in Pittsburgh against a division rival. Week before that he had 29 points against Cleveland, 32 points against Indy, 22, almost 23 points against Cincy. And then week 1 he had 8 points. So he's had some duds in there, but for the most part, Lamar Jackson has been. He's been awesome so far this season, and he's been a guy that you definitely are happy you drafted in best ball. But, one thing that has changed with Lamar Jackson this season is he finally has some weapons to throw to, and he has an offensive coordinator in Todd Monken that actually likes to throw the ball. So there's been less designed runs, and he's had a higher passing success rate this season under Monken than he has in previous years. So it seems like the offense is pretty much they're primed to have some success in the passing game. We haven't exactly seen too much yet. I think his his highest yard total so far has been 237 yards. So he hasn't broke out yet from a passing perspective. But Spread, what do you think about him kind of being on the edge of breaking out? And is this the matchup where that's going to happen?
Yes, he's on the edge of breaking out. No, I do not think this is the week we finally see it, and we're getting close. But the most amount of points this team has put up was the 28 they put up against Cleveland, which is a pretty good defense here. And that was in week 2. They put up 27 against Cincinnati. They got 25 when they defeated Houston. I'm sorry, Cleveland was week 4. But they have yet to just put up one of those huge games, right, that we've seen from like Miami and Buffalo. But I don't think against Tennessee that's going to happen. Tennessee's a tough team. They're going to run the ball. They're going to grind this out. There should be less plays run than in the usual high-power game. So I don't think this is going to be the week that he statistically breaks out. And if this game was on the normal main slate, I don't think we'd be targeting it. Right? It's got a pretty low total overall. It's in at 42.5. So as far as like a breakout, I don't think so. But I still think he's got a great chance to be the best player fantasy-wise for this individual Showdown Island game.
Yeah. And to Spread's point, the total is 40.5 points, and we got Baltimore as 4-point favorites.
You have 40?
I got 40.5, but that was earlier.
Okay, I have 42.5 offshore right now, so maybe it's gone up a little. I know last week went under on a 45, on a total of 48.5, but before that, Tottenham had consistently been over, and I think it's because we talked about that turf not really being real grass. Kind of faster there, helps the receivers.
What do you got for the spread?
Right now, I have the Ravens all the way out to -5. That makes sense. A lot has been played on that narrative. And we just saw it last week. And the narrative I mean is the travel narrative. And one interesting aspect of that is Baltimore's only been there one other time, and they flew the way that Tennessee did, and they got shelved in that game. It was one of the worst losses for the team under Coach Harbaugh. So he said, I looked at that trip and I decided I'm going to do everything exactly different. All right. So whatever we did last time, we're going to do the exact opposite here this time. So they went out early. They set everything up. Now Tennessee's flying in later. There have been different arguments for both, but the general consensus is that's a huge upgrade for the Ravens. Also, I think there's a little bit, both teams coming off a loss, which both teams have done well traditionally. But I think that's also giving the Ravens a little bit more of love in this market because they have so many more ways to score. I feel that Tennessee's limited offensively compared to the Baltimore Ravens' multitude of options, especially at wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And I think the Ravens have a lot more, defensive. There's a lot more defensive weaknesses on the Titans that they can exploit with those weapons. And there's not a ton of weak spots on Baltimore's defense this year. They're playing pretty lights out this year, so they've been pretty good. As far as
there is one weakness here.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into that when we talk about a player named Derrick Henry. Yeah. And I might have the name wrong, but I believe his name is Marcus Williams. He's a safety. He's playing with an injured shoulder, and that came up as an issue with his tackling ability against the Steelers on the run. So that's one issue I think that we have with the Ravens. And if you do like the Titans here to get the upset, because the Titans to me are like the Steelers, Simon, where, when you want to bet on them, when they look absolutely terrible, right? You don't want to bet them as a favorite, right? You want to bet them when their backs are against the wall. So if you do like a Titans build, because that's going to be less popular already, and I think that's something to look there for here is you have a safety, who's going to be the last line of defense against a strong rushing attack who has an injured shoulder and wasn't tackling to his top form last week.
Yeah, that's a good nugget there, Spread. And both these teams, like the quarterback position to Lamar versus Tennessee, like Tennessee's giving up 16.1 points per game to the quarterback position, so that's very middling. And Baltimore is giving up, I believe, the league low at 11.3 point DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So it's not a good matchup really for either quarterback. But if you look a little further into, the weaknesses of the Tennessee defense, their weakest spot is against the slot receiver, where they're giving up 25.7 DraftKings points a game. And the guy who runs the most of his routes from the slot is Nelson Aguilar. But we also got Zay Flowers, who runs about 30% of his routes from the slot too. So there's a couple guys, that could benefit from the weakness of this, Tennessee secondary. But also, since we're on the Nuggets right now, Tennessee struggled last week against the run, and their defensive line, Tart. We want to keep an eye on Tart this week because last week when Tart was out, Zach Moss was able to just run all over this team. And Tennessee normally has a very strong run defense, as we know. Like they're one of the top run Ds in the league. But last week the Colts were able to run all over them because they were weakened. Like Simmons was hurt and Tart was out. And we're looking at Tart's status, Tyir Tart's status this week. Right now, he's questionable. He didn't practice all week, but then he had a limited practice on Friday. So we want to keep an eye on his status because that's going to give the Ravens another route to attack this Tennessee defense in the run game, where we would normally not expect a team to try to attack Tennessee. But like I said, we saw Zach Moss last week. He had like 150 yards and like one or two touchdowns. He just had a monster game against them last week. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye out when you're looking at the inactives for tomorrow. Let's see. Going on to our next player, Derrick Henry. Spread just covered a little bit about that there. Spread, why don't you give us your thoughts on Derrick Henry this week in general?
So I gave you the nugget about the safety. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing for the Ravens, though. Arguably the best inside linebacker duo, right? And if they can use Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith to make sure that Marcus Williams doesn't need to make those tackles, it's going to be a long day for Tennessee. And that's quite plausible here. Let's look at that loss. I know that they were disappointed by the loss from Pittsburgh, but it wasn't the defensive side of the ball. And Pittsburgh, a team that likes to run the ball, was not able to get it going. However, we can say that I think I can safely say, right, that I have better backs here in Tennessee. And I have an equal offensive line. So it's going to be a little tougher this week because it's not the traditional thunder and lightning, but we're getting there, right? As Tyjae Spears is getting more and more work. For fantasy owners, it's kind of frustrating because it's getting pretty close to a 50-50 share now, Simon, as far as the snap count. But as for a team, it makes sense because Derrick Henry is getting older, and it's been amazing what he's been able to do. Traditionally, players that have had his usage fall off, and he hasn't done it. He's almost like a cyborg, Simon. He's like the exception that proves the rule. Him, Adrian Peterson. Every once in a while, we get these guys that just aren't worn down by the workload. But I think Vrabel's still looking ahead. Not only that, Spears is a little better catching the ball out of the backfield, and he's a little faster, right? Which gives you a little more juice. And I think it's a great tandem for Vrabel to use. The problem is they haven't been able to build leads. They haven't been able to get that going with Tannehill and Treylon Burks, who was supposed to be huge in this offense. Now he's going to be out again, right, Simon?
Yep, he's out.
And I think that's been put too much on DeAndre Hopkins. And we see how these GMs, they have great plans, and injuries can really rob them. This isn't the team we built, right? I know we have weaknesses, but I did address this in the offseason, and I feel that it's, without Burks up there to take the top off, a little too much attention on Hopkins. I know I've been flying all around it when we're talking about Derrick Henry, but you're paying a lot here, Simon, and here some other concerns, and I'm bouncing all around, but bear with me. Hopefully this is all actionable information. You talked about the slow start with the teams that are traveling later. Let's combine that with the fact that the Ravens have the best first quarter win percentage or point differential of any team in the NFL right now. I believe it's 37-3 off the top of my head, but regardless, I don't know the exact number, but I do know it's the best in the NFL. That's two bad things when we're targeting a running back on a team that's the underdog, right?
Yeah.
Because I want, if I'm off to an early, now we know that Tennessee will run the ball regardless, but I really like the Ravens first half as a bet. And I think that this could be a problem for owning Derrick Henry here today. So obviously he's a great contrarian play. I don't think its ownership is going to be too high in the captain spot. And I think there's plausible reasons why, mainly the fact that I expect Baltimore to get out to a big lead, and they've traditionally had a pretty good run defense.
Yeah, I'll add to that the Henry thing. Like when you're doing your game scripts, when you're planning out these lineups that you're building for this DraftKings Showdown, keep that in mind. What Spread just said, because if the Ravens are able to jump out to an early lead, which they're completely capable of doing, especially if Tennessee's banged up in the run D and in the not banged up, but they're just not good in the secondary. So if Ravens are able to take a big lead in that first half, Derrick Henry's touch share goes down to like 50% or something like that. Like when he's playing from behind. So Derrick Henry is about as game script dependent as you can get when it comes to a running back. So if you want to write Derrick Henry out of a game script, the best way to do that is to build your lineup with the thinking that the Ravens are going to take this big lead and take advantage of the sluggishness of Tennessee and take advantage of what Spread was just talking about with their tendency to outscore opponents in that first quarter and take a nice lead to take Derrick Henry out of the game, basically. And that brings us to his running partner, Tajay Spears, who is a guy that we were targeting in best ball massively this season. And he had his first, big game last week. He had 34 yards rushing and then 4 receptions for 35 yards receiving too. But he scored his first touchdown, put up 17 points. His salary this week has been affected. Obviously, he's at 7,400. That's pretty expensive for the general work that he's gotten. But if you put in a game script together where the Ravens take a nice lead, then Spears might be interesting in a build like that. What's your thoughts on Spears Spread?
Yeah, I think he's a great play if you're building a Ravens win game script. If we talk what I'm talking about, Tennessee gets a slow start, Ravens get up to a double-digit lead, then that's where we know Spears is going to stay in. A 7-0 lead, they're still going to stick with their deal. A one-score game, they'll be content to run the ball. It's those 2-score leads where Tajay Spears really becomes viable here. And I do believe the Ravens are going to get out early. I love him as a run back on a Ravens heavy build, a 4-2 or a 5-1. Tajay Spears is all about run back. Now, when you go contrarian, right, if you're going multiple, that's when you go with the Derrick Henry and you leave him out. And the idea is like, hey, throw everything out the window. Just because that happened last week or last time doesn't mean it's going to happen. The Titans get out to a lead. The Titans bounce back because that's what they always do. When we count them out and start, running up mock drafts for them to get a new quarterback, they always bounce back. So I think it's a great way to approach it. If you like the Ravens to win the game as a bettor, and you're betting on the Ravens, you're going to play Tajay Spears. If you like the Titans here to get the upset or even just cover this 4 to 5 point spread, you like Derrick Henry. So this is a fun way where I think that doing a betting beforehand, right, running some projections, making a stand on the game helps you build your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derrick Henry coming in at about a 7.5% ownership in the captain spot. So that's a pretty decent ownership if you wanted to get a little contrarian, as Spread was mentioning a little earlier. Another guy that I am interested in this game is DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins is finally, he's not hurt anymore. So he's doing, he had a big game last week. He had 11 targets, 8 receptions for 140 yards. Didn't score a touchdown. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet on the year. He put up 25 fantasy points last week, and he's had 2 other weeks where he had over 10 fantasy points. But it looked like DeAndre Hopkins is starting to get accustomed to this offense, accustomed to Ryan Tannehill. What are your thoughts here on DeAndre Hopkins based on last week's performance, but also like what his matchup looks like against the Ravens here?
I think his production will continue to rise. DeAndre Hopkins is not getting a lot of separation at this point in his career, but he's one of the best at making contested catches. I think it took a little while for Tannehill to gain some trust to throw him in those situations where, from a quarterback read, when he's looking at the film with his coach and his offensive coordinator, he's throwing it to a covered receiver. But Hopkins makes those catches. Now that he's starting to realize that, it's going to be huge, especially in the red zone. He's another one I like for the run back. So let's say I'm building a 4-2 Ravens build. Spears and Hopkins are probably my top 2 targets. Might be spending a little too much there. But my point is, I don't think I'm going to put Tannehill in that build. I'm going to go ahead and use Hopkins. I think he's going to get a majority of the targets and maybe some Spears there to run it back. So I like Hopkins as a run back in a heavy build. And you know what? I guess if you like a Titans build, you're going to have to put him in there too. If you go a Titans, you want to do the Titans upset script, I think he's necessary as well. So he probably should get a lot of ownership because I think in both game scripts, Simon, you could see him on the optimal.
Yeah, I think you're right. As far as a captain, though, his captain ownership is pretty low at 7.5%. We'll see what that looks like towards game time. But yeah, right now, like if your name isn't Tannehill, I don't know how Tannehill is projected at 11% ownership, but in the captain. But Tannehill, Andrews, and Lamar Jackson are the highest projected captain ownerships. Checking out RG's projections right now. Another interesting note on Hopkins there is the Ravens have been most beatable by those contested catch receivers. So the guys with the ability to make those contested catches have done the best against the Ravens defense. And Hopkins is also on top of that. He's receiving a 30% target share in this offense. So that's pretty significant because we're looking for guys that are going to get opportunity when we're playing on Showdown, and Hopkins is getting plenty of opportunity as far as the passing game in this offense. 13.
The thing is, nobody's getting open, so you're going to throw it to him.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Without Burks out there, I know Westbrook Akine has had some nice games here and there, but we can't necessarily count on him. This receiving core does have some issues. They were light to begin with, and then they lose their number 2 guy. And now we've really seen some weaknesses in the Titans' offensive game plan as far as their ability to put up points. They want to get the lead and just run you into the ground. It's affected their ability to come back, which, of course, with all the stats I've given out earlier, is going to be a concern for us if you're making a Titans build.
Yeah, and we're talking about, like a dusty quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. He has looked bad like the past couple years now, and the offensive line isn't what it used to be. Tannehill, he's not what he used to be with his athletic ability. Spread and I, we talked about that a couple weeks ago with Ryan Tannehill lacking in his athletic ability these days. And it's showing up in his DraftKings stats: 10 points, 13.7, 4 points. 21 points was his big game against the Chargers, but we're not playing against the Chargers defense this week, and 5 points in week 1. What are your thoughts here on Ryan Tannehill in the matchup that's about the worst that you can have? Well, actually is the worst that you can have for a quarterback going against this Ravens defense.
I think the argument you have is you're going to get contrarian, and then if you're right, you don't have to be. You can miss a couple other ones and still cash.
Yeah.
I personally don't like them at all.
No,
I think I build one contrarian Titans game script that goes 4-2, and I'll throw them in that one. But a majority of my lineups, I believe, are going to be Ravens heavy. So, and like I said, my runbacks, I'm more excited to get these skill players, namely Spears and Hopkins, more than Tannehill. Now, are you surprised that Hopkins cost more than Tannehill? Do you think that's the reason we're seeing that?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all because Tannehill, I'm actually surprised that he's as expensive as he is, to be honest with you. I would have figured, he'd be 8,600 range, something like that, because he's shown no upside for like a couple years now, and Hopkins has all the upside in the world. We see it with these quarterbacks like Derek Carr this season and guys like that who are putting up zero, like fantasy points themselves, but the receivers can blow them out of the water. Like Olave with Carr and Hopkins with Tannehill here. So
that comes down to my major criticism about fantasy scoring is I think that for quarterbacks, running is so overrated. Right? Because say in our best ball, like Justin Fields was going ahead of Joe Burrow. Now let's say you're just a normal fan and I just go down the street. Hey, who's your favorite team? Oh, I like the Titans. Oh, who would you rather have, Justin Fields or Joe Burrow? I mean, come on. So for players like Tannehill, who actually used to be pretty good at running, Simon, and we've seen that athleticism disappear, but now for arm-only guys that aren't putting up Herbert-like numbers, it's really tough for them to justify their salary.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Tannehill for me, he's in a void. I'm not gonna. Even in a Titan lineup, I'm going to prioritize Henry and Hopkins over Tannehill for sure. And you're only going to have so many of those expensive guys that you can squeeze into a lineup. So for me, I think there's too many guys on this list with more upside than Tannehill, like Jackson, Henry, Hopkins. I'd put Andrews and Flowers on that list. And, Tajay Spears, I think, would be on the tier of Tannehill, I think, for potential fantasy output this week. For Mark Andrews, like one of the other guys that we're projecting to have one of the highest ownerships on the captain ownerships on the slate, he is 5th in price. So he's 5th in price, but he's putting up, he's putting up the second most average fantasy points a game. So that's interesting here with Mark Andrews. He's relatively inexpensive. He has had 3 decent games so far this season, 12.5 fantasy points against Pittsburgh, 25 points against Cleveland, 15.5 points against Cincy. Andrews has looked pretty good this season, and he's obviously Lamar's favorite target. Although we do have a receiver we'll get to in a minute that has become one of Lamar's favorite targets. But we're looking at 10 targets last week and 8 targets in week 2. He was out week 1, but then he has 5 targets and 5 targets in between that. What are your thoughts here on Andrews? He doesn't have the best matchup with Tennessee, only giving up 8.5 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. But what do you think here on Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I think the price is there because of the matchup. Tennessee definitely built their defense middle out, which to me means that they have much better players at their line and linebacker positions than their secondary. And it makes sense. That's an old school way to go. Their coach is a former linebacker, and he's not going to let other teams run the ball on him. And that's their focus there. So because of the strength in the middle there, it doesn't surprise me that they dumped down his projections a little bit. And I don't think that's a reflection on Andrews or Jackson's fondness for throwing the ball to Andrews. I think that's the idea that Vrabel's not going to let the number 1 tight end beat him. He's going to try and get those guys outside to the ball, and he's going to want to try and stop the run and stop the middle of the field.
What do you think if Tyir Tart is out, being one of those interior defensive line guys, and Simmons is still banged up? Like, what do you think that does for Mark Andrews' matchup?
It might not even help it that much with the idea that now they're going to be able to run the ball better.
Yeah.
One thing that we're talking about, though, is the Titans aren't the only line here in that matchup that has injury issues. The Ravens have had multiple injury issues on their offensive line, too. So it could end up being a wash. I know that Staley hasn't practiced at all, their left tackle, and he goes out there on game day, but he's not 100%. And they're down to their 3rd string on the right tackle for this game. So this isn't a fully healthy, crushing Ravens offensive line that's going to be able to attack a weakened defensive line. These are 2 wounded lions going at each other, and we'll see who emerges. So, but if Tart's ruled out, I would actually upgrade Henry, and I want, if anything, I would, I'm sorry, not Henry. Who's going to be our number 1 back here that we're targeting here?
I think
Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. Yeah, I would upgrade the running backs more than I would Mark Andrews.
Rice. I was thinking Ray Rice. I was like, that's how boomer I am.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, I was thinking Jerry Rice. That's how boomer I am. Let's go.
Yeah, 2 old guys, man. Zay Flowers is the next guy on the list here. Zay Flowers is a guy that I like a lot in this matchup, especially with what we were digging into earlier in the slot. The Titans are giving up almost 26 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. They're giving up 18 points a game to wideouts. So they're vulnerable in every aspect of that passing game, and vulnerable to the tune of almost, pretty much like bottom 5, bottom 10 in the league. So really good matchup here for Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers has been on the brink of breaking out this season, and thankfully for us Showdown fans, he has not broken out yet. He's had targets of 11, 4, 10, 5, and 10. So anything that can get this guy lesser owned than we would expect. The fact that he's a rookie, so his name isn't as well known as some of these other players, helps us too. He's on the verge of breaking out. He's had 4 games over 10 fantasy points, and he has yet to catch a touchdown, and he has yet to rush one in. Zay Flowers is my favorite play on the slate in this game, and I'm hoping that I've seen him start to get steamed, which I'm I don't like to see, but he's my favorite play by far on the slate. What are your thoughts here on Zay Flowers spread?
Zay Flowers has shown the ability to get open. He's just got to finish these catches. He's had big drops in each of the Ravens' losses. This team could easily be 5-0, which they've said multiple times during the press conferences they did this week. So I'll tell you what, with a guy like him, I'm just happy to see him separation. Where you really get these wide receiver busts is when they get to the league and they're not able to get open, right? Like the guy out in New England that I thought was going to be so good, Keneal Harry or whatever, just could never get open. He's getting open. He's just not bringing the ball in. I think Lamar has trust in him. They're going to get this thing going. I love your play. And on the convert side, talked to you a little bit about it before, but we'll go in a little more in depth. Simon, you've been out with couples that are headed for a divorce. They're fighting at the dinner. They're fighting at the party. They're not even hiding it anymore, right? I mean, they're on their way, right? This isn't going to work. And I feel that's what's happening there with the number 1 cornerback, Christian Fulton, and Tennessee Titans head coach Mike Vrabel. His dad's tweeting about him moving on. Vrabel was very quick to criticize him. And I watched about a 50-second clip where it was constructive, but he was letting everyone know he wasn't happy with the effort that he gave. So here's some issues we've had with Christian Fulton. Number 1, and Vrabel brought this up in the press conference, he's going for interceptions in coverages that were not designed for it. And Vrabel talked about, hey, I want these guys aggressive in zones, but man-to-man, we're playing to prevent the catch and to make the tackle when the catch is made. We're not gambling in man-to-man. We're gambling in zone. Christian Fulton is gambling man-to-man. Does that make sense? Of course. He wants to move on. What's he want? He wants those interception numbers, right? So when he goes to try and get a contract with a new team, he at least has some nice statistics. The second problem with Christian Fulton has been his inability to avoid penalties. And that's where I think that Vrabel's done with him, because in his after the game against who did they lose to last week? The Colts. So he acknowledged that he messed up on the Pittman play where he went for the interception and Pittman was able to get a big play. Where he refused to acknowledge was his penalties. He was saying, no, that's a bad call. That's a bad call. You go and watch the replays, and coaches talked about it. No, that wasn't a bad call. He's not playing these correctly. So, they spent a high draft pick on this guy. He's obviously got talent, but there's a disconnect between him and the coaching staff. What's that going to do? That should open some things up, especially for excellent route running receivers such as Zay Flowers. So conversely, we found 2 different ways to look at this, Simon, and we both landed on the same player that we want to attack for the slate.
Yeah. Just to add to the goodness with Flowers here, like the pass success rate of Lamar is way up this season under Todd Monken, and they've increased their 3 wide receiver sets from 39% to 51%. This is an article by Ben Solak that pointed that stuff out. Lamar's time to throw is also down 0.3 seconds, and they have more spread formations, but quicker release time by Lamar, I think, favors Zay Flowers too. And in a matchup like this, where you can attack them anywhere with your wide receivers, I just think that Zay Flowers, if he's going to have a breakout game this season, like this is the week for it. They're rested in London, playing against sluggish defense coming into London on Thursday night, Friday morning. What Spread just mentioned, the issues that they're having with the cornerback being disgruntled, on top of already being a bad defense against wide receivers. Anyways, I just think all signs are pointing to Zay Flowers, and like I was saying, he's my favorite play on the slate this week. So we talked about Spears already. Let's move on to Beckham. Beckham's in kind of the opposite direction as what we're seeing with Zay Flowers. Beckham's been looking like he's running in mud. He had a similar situation when he came back from his knee injury before. He started off really bad. Eventually started picking things up. So we don't know. I wouldn't write off Beckham just yet, but he definitely has looked like age is catching up to him so far this season. 4 targets, 3 targets, and has not scored over 6 fantasy points. Spread, what's your thoughts here on Odell Beckham?
I think this could be a time for him to go. When we're looking at the fact that he finally went through a full practice this week has to be good news. Obviously, injury issues before. You're right. He never doesn't seem to have that same speed that he had, but he's still a great player. I'll tell you what, I was really hoping that we could grab him at a flyer, but they priced him on his name and not his production. So unfortunately, I don't really think there's a lot of value there unless you're just simply trying to be contrarian. I mean, just if you look at the guy's numbers and his log sheet, does that scream 6,200 on the slate to you?
No.
So, I mean, you compare Tyjae Spears at 7,400. He's had much more solid production to build upon. Whereas Beckham, I feel like they just know a lot of us know that he's good and we want to play him. We see maybe a breakout coming, but it's really hard to justify him there at his salary. Even a guy like Aguilar at 5,600 to me right now is a little more enticing. I get a little bit of the savings, and I can also, I'm not just, hey, this is going to be the week, right? Because I don't want to burn too much, too many entries waiting for this guy to have a big week. So I actually prefer Aguilar when I'm looking at these secondary receivers. A little bit cheaper and a little bit safer. Beckham, you're swinging for the fences, but just know I could sink some of your lineups, especially right because we've been nailing captains, right, Simon? And it's just rough because what was the one I had on Monday? You get the one snowflake, and you can still min cash, but it's the difference between maybe on the $15 entry winning $2,500 and $25 and $500.
Yeah,
right. Just that one snowflake. So that's my worry about Beckham. If you want to swing for the fences, go for it. But I think there's better, safer options.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Thielen was not a snowflake, by the way. When Spread picked him for a captain pick, that was before he broke out, and we put him in the captain in one of our lineup builds on that show, and he ended up going off and being the highest scoring guy on the Carolina slate there. Nelson Aguilar, I'm with you on that. One note with Odell Beckham is that he's only projected at 12% right now, according to RotoGrinders, as far as the flex position, not the captain position, the flex position. So 12% ownership. Seems like people are not wanting to pay that price for Odell Beckham, which if you want to go contrarian, if you're looking for a contrarian guy to kind of, if you got a chalky lineup, and you want to get it a little bit different, Odell Beckham, 12% ownership. If he's ready to break out and he breaks out, Spread mentioned he's had his first practice, but I'm with Spread though. I like Nelson Aguilar better, and it seems like Nelson Aguilar has been getting a decent chunk of this offense to himself. He had 5 targets last week. Versus Cleveland, he only had 2 targets, but then he had 4 versus Indy and 6 versus Cincy for a 5,600 salary. That's not too bad. He's had 2 weeks over double-digit fantasy points with 10.4 versus Pittsburgh and 17 versus Cincy. So he's got a much easier matchup this week, and with the way that I think that this game script would play out. I don't know how many Baltimore receivers I'd limit myself to in each lineup, but in general, I think that, obviously we've talked up Vrabel and what he's able to do as a coach. I just think there are too many elements working against Tennessee in this game. I think that Baltimore, might win this game by, like multiple scores. And in that situation, like I would probably only want to put like one wide receiver in my lineup because that would be, them playing with a pretty significant lead. So I don't know how much passing exactly they would do, but like Nelson Aguilar would be a good, like number 2 receiver to go along with Flowers. But with those guys both running all those routes in the slot spread, do you think there's going to be enough work to put 2 of them in a lineup?
Sure, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go past these scrubby quarterbacks. Burks is out, as we were talking about. We got the running backs now. Now the running backs for Baltimore are priced way down. Like we're talking 5,400 and 5,200 for Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. They're in a timeshare, so that makes sense, and they have a tough matchup against Tennessee. But if those injuries to Tennessee's run D come to fruition, then that leaves Justice Hill and Gus Edwards in a much better spot. This is an offense that has kind of built its legacy on running the ball. I know I was talking earlier about Monken coming in, but if they're playing with a big enough lead in this game, like I think that they will. These running backs are interesting to me. Justice Hill, he was hurt at one point for week 3. Rushing attempts, he's had 7 last week, 3 the week before that, 11 and 8. But he's been involved in the passing game with 4 targets last week and 3 in week 2. Has not really had a huge game so far this season, but he did have 2 rushing touchdowns in week 1 against Houston. That was when Dobbins went down. And he had 1 last week against Pittsburgh. So he's got some production there. How does that compare to Gus Edwards? Gus Edwards, we're looking at 12. It looks like Gus is the lead back. 12 attempts, 15 attempts, 11 attempts, 8 attempts, 8. And he had 3 targets in week 4, but that's the only passing game work that he's got. Has not done anything with that except from week 2 with 12 fantasy points. Other weeks he hasn't put up more than 7. But what are your thoughts here on these guys, Spread? Which of these running backs do you think would be the guy to target in a game script where we might think that Baltimore is playing from a significant lead?
Even if we think that Baltimore's playing from a lead, I still prefer Justice Hill if I'm choosing one. My idea is I don't think that even with a lead, they're going to be able to line up and run the ball here. And they're going to need to get creative. And I think we're going to see some Bill Walsh short passing, right? Where he said, hey, 2-yard pass is the same as a run, because that's the way to attack this Tennessee defense. And Mike Rabel, inside linebacker, his whole career is not going to just let you line up and run the ball against them. Although I thought that last weekend, Zach Moss did fantastic, right? But still, I think I'd prefer Hill. But my question is, can you get away with playing both? Or do you think that's just you're shooting yourself in the foot?
I think you're shooting yourself in the foot just looking at their outputs, but you can play both. The question is, are they good enough that you would want to put them, take up 2 roster spots with them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when we got guys down in this range, like both the kickers are cheaper. And look at the output that Nick Folk has had, for example, right? He's put out 12 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points. He had 1 week where he put up less than double digits with 4 against Cleveland, but then he's put up 10 against the Chargers and 18 versus New Orleans. So Nick Folk has been a beast this year, and his salary is $4,200. But again, if we're playing with a significant lead, they're not going to be playing for field goals. So that makes Nick Folk a little bit shaky in a matchup like this with our, the game script, at least that I'm thinking. Justin Tucker, though, Justin Tucker hasn't done anything yet this year. He's had 1 game over double-digit fantasy points. This is not the output that we're used to from Justin Tucker. I don't know if that has to do, maybe they're playing a more aggressive style. I haven't seen if they're going for it on fourths and whatnot. But we're looking at 4 fantasy points, 7, 11, and 5. So Justin Tucker has not had one of those classic Justin Tucker games yet. But with the way that both of these teams are able to defend in the red zone, that might set up Tucker to have some success in this game. Also cheaper than both those running backs. I like the idea of putting one of those running backs in, but I don't know that I would go two. But I mean, if you wanted to build different, like you could go two for sure.
So who are you choosing between the two?
Like I was leaning the same with you, Justice Hill. But looking at those attempts by Edwards, if we're looking at like Tart being out potentially, if Tart was out, I might go with Edwards. But I think if Tart is in, then yeah, with what Spread was saying before, maybe they'll do more of those short passes to Hill. So I think it kind of depends on like what the situation is shaking out to be. Like, what do you think of that, Spread? Oh, did I lose him? Yeah, that's Spread. All right. So Chigo Kwankwu is another guy that's in the same range here. He had 9 targets last year. That was his biggest output of the season. He had 3, 4, 4, and 2. He hasn't had any games with double-digit fantasy points. 8.3 is his highest total on the season, and that was last week against Indy. But Chig is a guy that I always like, but his matchup is not great, with Baltimore only giving up 6 points a game to tight end. So I don't really have Chig too much on my radar, but he's a good guy to cycle in if you got a good core and you find yourself in that price range. Ravens defense, like that's another one I'm kind of interested in, because if we have a game script where Ryan Tannehill is being forced to throw and they're playing from behind, like I can expect a ton of mistakes in that situation. And we're looking at Ravens scored 17 points against Cleveland in week 4. They scored 11 points against Houston in week 1. Let's see what defenses have done against Ryan Tannehill real quick. Ryan Tannehill, the Saints scored 10 against them. The Browns scored 12 against him. And, that was it. So there's been 2 out of 5 weeks defenses have scored double-digit points against Ryan Tannehill. But, yeah, I do have the Ravens on my radar this week, and they're not overly expensive. They're only at 4,600 versus some of those expensive defenses that we've seen pretty recently. So 4,600 is not bad for a defense, and it puts another decision that we have to make when we get down to this range here. Spread. We're finding ourselves more like once again in that range. And even Bateman is only 3,400 this week. He was a guy that was heavily touted coming into the season. I've never been a fan of Bateman. He's never really like shown anything. But seeing him down here, seems like Zay Flowers has definitely taken the preferential treatment in this offense, and Bateman has only had 3 targets in each of these games played so far. What are your thoughts on Bateman, Spread?
I guess he's worth a punt if you're trying to get contrarian, but yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't really like him either. He was someone I was really drafting a lot in best ball. Wasn't he right around that same range?
Yeah, I mean, he was in like
they were all in the same range, right? Flowers, Beckham, and yeah.
Yep.
So he's definitely disappointed me so far.
Yeah. I'm not. I'm with Spread on that. We just haven't seen anything out of him, and he's been one of those injury riddled guys, and you could just see him like on this turf that they're playing on. Like he dives for a ball, and the next thing you know, like he's out in the first quarter and questionable to return to the game. So, like Bateman is a guy that I don't have a whole lot of interest there, but he does have the upside. And if you are playing with a, Baltimore playing from a lead or Baltimore being, pass heavy, then it would make sense to plug him in if you're dumpster diving there a little bit, like, or if you're in that price range. But I'm not going to go out of my way to put him in any lineups, especially when we got guys like like Folk and Tucker and the Ravens D in this range too. Spread, what are your thoughts on the Ravens D?
Seems like it should be a pretty good spot. Right? For it to pay off, we're going to need to get a couple turnovers here.
Yeah.
This team takes care of the ball. So it's going to be a Tannehill interception, which isn't the craziest idea. So since we're building the Ravens winning script, I mean, I like it because we can't put all the studs in there, right? And you're looking at this range. I think I like the Titans kicker and the Ravens defense right in this range.
Yeah, I do too. Just with Folk's output, man, like he's just putting up a bunch of points. Like, I think if you're going with a blowout win on the Ravens, I'd probably stay away from Folk. But if you're thinking that the Titans can keep it within like a score throughout the game, then I really like Folk. I think Folk will be a great play in this game. And if we go further down, the only there are two guys that I see when you go down far enough. Isaiah Likely at 200. Isaiah Likely has not done anything this season. He hasn't gotten a target since week 2. Kind of wonder if he's like had some kind of an injury or something, but he's not being used. Oh, you know what it is? It's because they're using more 3 wide receiver sets this season. I think like that has kind of put Isaiah Likely on the outs in this offense. So that would make sense of why he's not getting targeted as much as he did the last couple years, or last year at least. And Chris Moore is the other guy I'd have a little bit of interest in at 200 if I needed to go there. Chris Moore, if you remember him on Houston last year, like he was putting up some big games in Houston last year, and like seeing him down here in the 200 range. He's had 3 targets against Cincy, 3 targets against Cleveland, 1 target against the Chargers, 1 target against New Orleans. Didn't do anything last week, but he's been putting up, like 6 fantasy points. All it takes is like one of those, targets turning into a touchdown, and he goes from like 6 to 11 points. And he's only $200. So if you are in a situation where you're trying to jam in too many studs and you're desperate, and you come down here in this range, I would take Chris Moore over Isaiah Likely, I think. Spread, do you have any thoughts on Chris Moore or Isaiah Likely?
Just throw one more name out there. I think that Duvernay's got about almost as much upside there as Rashad Bateman, and I can get him for $600.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, right, we're just throwing up prayers. He's had 3 targets, 1 target, 2 targets, 1 target, but for 600, you've jammed it up with studs, and you just need him to get a couple big plays there. So not much to add on what you said. I would just say that when you're dumpster diving, consider Duvernay as well. Wouldn't be surprised if he was able to hit the optimal with just a couple targets.
Yeah. And like this, I feel like this game has a lot more of those options under, like the in the dumpster as we've seen so far this season. Usually I have zero interest down there, but now I have, like at least a couple options. So let's take a look at a build here, Spread. I think for this first one, I would either do Lamar Jackson or Mark Andrews as a popular build if I was trying to build, like a popular lineup. Do you have a preference on either of those guys?
On Jackson or Andrews?
Yeah, for a popular captain, not something.
I like Jackson more.
Yeah, Jackson more. Now this isn't like when I do these builds. These are more like projecting, like or trying to predict how like the chalky build will go, as opposed to like guys that Spread and I like actually like in the captain, because I don't know that I'll have much Lamar in captain at all, because I see these cheaper options down here that I like. I like a lot more. But if we put Lamar Jackson in the captain, we probably, with them being, little more pass happy this season. I think we want to put him with two receivers. What do you think, Spread?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Let's put him with who do you let's put him do you want to put him with Flowers over Andrews? What do you think?
Yeah.
All right, we get a cheaper play in Flowers, so let's put Flowers in there. Let's see. Let's put Aguilar in there too, because we were talking up Aguilar, and Aguilar's 5,600.
Okay, where are we at now?
So now we're looking at 5,600 per guy. We need to put in a Titans guy in there. Which one do you think? Do you think this is a script where the a competitive game where Jackson is throwing more, and maybe like Derrick Henry is still in the game, or do you think this is more of a Hopkins play?
When we're going with this Ravens heavy build, I think we go with Hopkins.
Okay. So we put Hopkins in it. That leaves us with 3,800 per guy. Like, I think we need to look now in this like this low end range that we were talking about, where we got from Mick Folk up to Chiga Konku. Which of those guys would you like to put in this build?
Nick Folk.
Yeah, I like that too. That leaves us with 3,400. With 3,400, we got options. We got Bateman. We got Westbrook Akini. What's his matchup like in the slot against Baltimore here? Baltimore is, it's probably the best matchup that the Titans receivers have, with Baltimore giving up 19 DraftKings points again to slot receivers. So that would make Akine interesting in this matchup. But I think we probably want to go more Baltimore heavy. Like if we're playing with like a lineup like this. Do you like Bateman or Westbrook Akine in this or is there a guy that you prefer even more than one of those guys? Right?
I think Bateman's where you land here on this build.
Yeah, Bateman. That makes sense.
But be prepared to chop.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yep. Yeah.
Did it almost, we talked about this before. Sometimes we get, and that's where we get a lot of lineups. You get down to the end and you don't like where you're landing, but you like where you started.
Yep. I
mean, this one just builds itself, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like it, especially if you're in a smaller contest.
Mm-hmm.
And not that main $15 one. Like right now, I'm entering into the 3-entry max with only 294 other entries.
Yeah,
I like this lineup for that type of contest. Maybe try and get a little different on the big one.
Yeah, for sure. So let's clear this one out. Spread. Who was the guy that you were talking that you wanted to use as a captain apart from Flowers? We'll save the Flowers one for last.
I like the Flowers captain a lot too. Let me jump back here. I just entered that one when we made
which game script do you want to use Flowers with? Do you want to use them with a competitive game, or were you thinking of him with a blowout? Because I'm thinking of
with the Ravens winning fairly easily.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on that same. You know what? Screw it. Let's just do a Flowers one.
Let's do the Flowers build right now. I think that's the best way to approach this.
Yeah. Okay. So Flowers in the captain. Lamar Jackson. I want to put him in with Flowers as a captain. This one I would put Hopkins in. Like, what do you think their Spread?
Yeah, I love Hopkins here.
Okay. So if we're doing that, like we got it built up. I want to have an explanation for why Lamar Jackson, the guy with the highest upside on the slate, is not in the captain position. And maybe it's because they get to that red zone and, they're not, converting touchdowns. So maybe Flowers is getting a lot of PPR points. He's getting a lot of chunk yardage. He gets a touchdown or something. And for the rest of the times that they're able to move the ball, maybe it's Justin Tucker coming in there and getting field goals. What do you think of that Spread? Yeah,
I like that.
So let's get Tucker in there. That leaves us with 5,300 per position. Who do you like? That we could kind of put in next year's Spread. Do you want to go for a salary saver guy that you like, or what are you looking at here?
All right, so we have Flowers, Jackson, Hopkins, Tucker. This is a Ravens heavy build, so I'm thinking we're going to go. I think that at this point, we go with either the Ravens defense or one of the running backs. What do you think?
I am 100% on either of those picks. I think this is, this
like
is,
we're not going 5-1 though, are we? Do we still have to get a tight end in here? Do we go 4-2 or can we go 5-1 here?
I think the Ravens blow them out, honestly. I just don't see how, like if the Titans are going to keep in this game, I think their defense is going to have to do something, like just the way that they're set up. Or Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears is the only other guy that I think I would want to put in with Hopkins. Like just based on our script, but if we put him in there, that leaves us with 3,300. And then that kind of forces us to put either Duvernay or Westbrook-Akine, pretty much. And I don't really want to add a third Titan into a build like this, where I'm projecting kind of like a big win by Baltimore. So I think I'd go with one of the running backs here, or that defense, like you were saying. But the decision I make on which running back I'm going to go with is, I think it's going to depend on like Tart's status, honestly. Because if he's out, then I want Edwards, because I think that they'll be able to run the ball more effectively. And if he's in, then I think I want Hill, because of what Spread was saying earlier. Like they're going to be tougher to run on. So, like you'll probably, have to be doing these passes to Hill. So what do you think there, Spread? What's your thinking on that?
I think he's going to play, so let's go Hill.
Okay.
So but it's an easy one, right? Just get up, check it out, and just swap.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
When you get that news.
Yeah. Or like,
for me, it's a little tougher to get up, but.
Yeah. But one thing that I would do, like, unless you're playing in, a few $100 an entry or whatever, you're doing like the $15 contest. Like I just build a lineup.
Just dupe them.
Because why try to figure it out? Like why not just cover your bases there, like with each of those guys. And then at this point, you have plenty of options for that final spot. You could put double running back, like Spread was asking about earlier. You could do a Conquo. You could do Ravens D.
So we didn't talk about him a lot, unless you did it while my computer died, which seems to be now. And I think every single time I come on this show, I don't get it. But what were your thoughts on a Conquo? We've kind of gone away from him. We loved him in best ball. He hasn't shown up so far, and I don't think this is a good matchup for him this week.
Yeah, the matchup sucks. They're only giving up 6 points a game to tight end. So I don't like the matchup for him, but he did show some signs of life last week with 9 targets, but he has not scored over 9 points. I don't know why, like teams do this sometimes when you see a guy that's clearly looks like he's gonna have a breakout season, and then they just fall flat in the following season. Like, it happens a lot. Maybe it's not necessarily like the coaching fault, because he's gotten targets. He's got 4 targets in week 2, 4 in week 3, 9 in week 5. Maybe just like defenses are onto him, and he's just he just can't do anything. When he's got more defenders on him or something. What are your thoughts there, Spread? What do you think about him?
It's one of those things where I think we get excited in best ball because of where his draft position is, and we're not actually rating him as a player. Because I think that where his draft position, well, first of all, everybody wanted to go tight ends late, right? And so far that's been true. These top tight ends haven't been paying off their ADP. So I can understand why they wanted to do it. So you're trying to find that diamond in the rough. He had that upside potential, but we haven't seen it yet so far. This offense is not clicking. We talked about Tannehill's regression, and I think he's one of the big guys that is suffering from that, because the offense as a whole isn't working, which gives him less opportunities. So I'm fine just completely skipping him for this matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, and then you got like Bateman and Westbrook-Akine too. So you got plenty of options, like in a build like this. Let's clear this out. Let's do a like a alternate universe where the Titans are actually going to win this game. How are the Titans going to win this game, Spread?
So the Titans win this game by, number one, reversing the trend of Baltimore getting out early and the teams coming late, getting out early. They go ahead. They use Tannehill. They use Henry, and they get a big play from Tannehill to another receiver not named DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins still has a big game, but it's a guy like a Keenway or a Okonkwo that has a game-breaking play, allows them to get the lead and rely on Derrick Henry. So if we are doing a Titan script build, I think you go Henry captain, and then we throw in a Tannehill. You make your choice between a Keenway or a Okonkwo, and then we'll figure out how to run it back with Ravens.
I'd go a Keenway just because that's going to give us salary relief. And if we don't have a preference between the two, I'd rather go with the cheaper guy. And he has better matchup.
All right, so let's get started on that. So we decided we're going Henry captain, right?
Yep.
Hold on, I'm rebuilding up because I submitted and I had to rebuild with the Justice and the Gus swap. So I'm liking what we're starting so far. But this is our contrarian one. And of course, I'm not doing this in a smaller contest. This contrarian I'm running in the full showdown special. In a smaller contest, I don't want to do that. If we're going to do this, let's swing for the fences here, right? And we'll play the builds that we believe in a little more in those smaller contests. So we're swinging for the fences here. We said we got Henry at captain. We got Tannehill at only 9,200. So you can see why this build is attractive here, because we've got 3 players in here so far that we love the upside for, and we still have 7,700 per player left. So how do we run this back?
Well, let's say now here's the question. Do we both like Flowers in general? So let's get Flowers in here.
Okay.
Now here's the question. Do we want to put Jackson in here, or are the Titans winning because Jackson is struggling?
Titans are winning because Jackson's struggling.
Okay.
And he might not even be having a bad game. It could be just like the game last week where he's delivering on part, but the team's not getting it done. Or we talked about the injuries to the Titans defensive line. Those Ravens offensive line injuries come home to roost, and he simply doesn't have time to make things work. He breaks off some runs, but not enough to pay off his salary.
Right. I do think that if the Titans win, it's going to be in a close game. So I think that in that situation that Baltimore is going to be in this game. So if they're playing close, then do you think that maybe we put in Justin Tucker? Because I wouldn't want to put Folk necessarily in a build like this, just because we don't want to take those scoring opportunities away from Henry, because they're going to be valuable for a running captain, and we don't want to take those scoring opportunities away from Tannehill either, because we need Tannehill to probably rush one in to show up in this lineup. So maybe Tucker on the other side is taking those opportunities.
I think it's Tucker or Titans defense right around that range, and then we have a lot of money to work with.
Oh yeah, that gives us 10 too. We could put Hopkins, we could put Andrews. Oh, dude, yeah. Like if we're gonna have Tannehill in there in this build, I would put Hopkins in there for sure. Yeah. Because I don't think Tannehill, unless he rushes one in, he's not going to be able to, get in this without having two receivers to throw to, and who better than Hopkins to be his second receiver there.
Yeah, I love this. I like our main build, and this is a fun little contrarian build to run back in the 15. And then I like our Ravens heavy build and start attacking those smaller contests, which have a better ROI than the lottery ticket, right? So throw your favorite lineup in the 15, of course, right? You don't want to miss out, right? The week you finally hit it, you want to have a chance of that 100K. But I'd say put a majority of your bankroll in some of these smaller contests. Some of these single entries could be a lot of fun, especially with the lineup that you're feeling strong about. And our original Zay Flowers build, I like that one a lot. I'm going to be trying to target some of these smaller contests for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just as always, when we're building these lineups, just use this for, the thinking through games, use us for the nuggets that we give in these shows. Cause we're not always going to be right on our captains and stuff. And you guys are just as capable as we are as kind of, thinking through these game scripts and stuff and coming up with, game scripts, come up with the game scripts based on the captain that you pick. If you pick such and such as a captain, build a game script where it would create the perfect game environment for that guy to succeed in that game and have the highest score that justifies having him in a captain position, or at least having maybe not necessarily the highest score, but having the score you need for him to be the winner in the captain spot. So, other than that, subscribe to the page, subscribe to @HeatSeeker Sports over on Twitter. Spread, where can they find you and where can they find your content this week?
That's right, @Spread Astaire. My next content I'll be producing will be on Monday. We'll be doing a review show on the Nuke the House YouTube channel with the keg. So that should be a lot of fun. But just follow me. I'm going on multiple platforms right now. Today, the most recent one I posted was we were on ESPN 97.5, the game in Houston last night, giving out our winners for the weekend. And hey, if you head over right now, you can listen quick. And most of the college games that those guys gave out haven't kicked off yet. And then, of course, you'll get all my NFL winners for tomorrow.
Yep. And, Nuke the House, speak of which, Keg should be on with me on Monday. We're trying to get Keg on to a game script episode on Monday, so we'll break down.
And that's a great game.
Yeah,
that's a great game, Simon. I can't wait to hear how you guys break that one down.
Yeah,
I think you can make arguments for both sides just from a betting perspective. And since I won't be on with you, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of nugget. I did bet Cowboys -2 to bounce back against Los Angeles. The Cowboys have had good success in Los Angeles in the past, and I believe they're going to get back to running the ball. Hey, I'll let you guys do the magic there, but I'll tell you what, Simon, you might see me on those leaderboards with the Tony Pollard captain. So that's the way I'm approaching that, but I can't wait to hear your in-depth breakdown.
I like that too. And I like the Kellen Moore angle in that game too. Kellen Moore going against the team that dropped him against Mike McCarthy. So that'll be an interesting.
Yeah, it should be a fun one for the Monday night. And I'll check out Peyton and Eli. I love how they root for offenses no matter what.
Yeah,
Peyton wants every score to be 63 to 55. I love it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So yeah, hit that like button, get me to 15 likes, and I'll put out that short video. And make sure to look out on Sunday for the Sunday night game script. And until then, we'll see you guys later, and good luck.